Welcome to Private Property Podcast. My name is Salem Nyati, and tonight, thanks to the speaker's firm and private property, I am going to be your guest presenter. Now, I've been in the debt coaching and financial literacy space for about 18 years, and I'm passionate about personal finance. My main aim is to really get people out of debt. And tonight, I'm speaking to the MD of MortgageMe because property is one of the most expensive purchases that you will make. And the aim of the show is to provide you with valuable knowledge and information that can help you navigate this journey like a pro. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned investor or just looking for some expert advice, tonight is no different. Well, as you know, the show is every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. and is gladly brought to you by Private Property. Remember, you can find your new home on privateproperty.co.za. Now, on tonight's episode, we'll be talking about those pesky rising interest rates, with the repo rate recently hitting a 14-year high and the subsequent interest rate hikes. Homeowners across South Africa are facing an unprecedented challenges when it comes to affordability. And joining us in studio to help us unpack this frustrating topic is the MD of MortgageMe, Andrea Tucker, who is well equipped to provide expert insights and practical advice on managing higher interest rates and the resulting impact on the home loan repayments. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag #FindYourNewHome on privateproperty.co.za and hashtag the Private Property Podcast on all social media. Andrea, welcome,
Yes.
welcome on this very, very, very important conversation. I must start by saying that consumers are told to squeeze that already tight belts. I mean, numbers in the credit bureaus are showing us that consumers are struggling with debt repayments. And now what's even scarier is the fact that we see a high number of consumers missing bond repayments. What can consumers do? I mean, with the whole interest rates, how can we actually face this challenge head on as consumers?
The first advice I will give any consumer who is facing financial challenges at the moment, which is probably all of us in the room tonight, everyone is going through a very, very similar challenge, is not to ignore it. It's not going to go away. If you're paying off long-term debt or even short-term debt, by ignoring the problem just means that you're going to have to sort this out in a more proactive way at some point in the future. Don't assume the bank doesn't notice that you're not paying off your home loan installment or that you're not paying off the minimum outstanding balance on your credit card. They know. And if you're not making the full payment or not making any payments at all, rather be proactive and sit down with your bank and have a discussion with them upfront and explain what your challenging situation looks like. And if you've thought through some of your options before you have that discussion with the bank, go to them with your proposals as to what you think you could do in the short term to handle your financial challenges and the difference with your income and expenditure, possibly not lining up at the moment. Go to them with some proposals, and I'm pretty sure every bank is going to be open to that discussion and open to your suggestions, and they'll give you some viable options that you can look at in the short term.
Okay, you mentioned something very interesting here. You said you as the consumer can go with your options to the bank. I didn't know that was a thing.
So if you are paying off long-term debt and you know you're not going to be able to make payments, maybe you already have missed a couple of payments, and it's the responsible thing to do to have a look at your financial situation, have a look at what you could possibly cut if you haven't already made those cuts.
Okay.
Make those cuts or list them, and go and sit with your bank representative and approach them with your solutions. You look more proactive, look more responsible.
I see.
And it's something that we all need to do when the belt is tightening, income's not going up, but your expenses keep going up. That belt tightening exercise that starts with you downloading 3 months bank statements and having a look at what comes off your bank account on a monthly basis and being proactive about making those changes, that's the first step that you need to do before you even sit down with your bank, is have a look at what you can cut from your daily expenses or your household expenses to make it more possible to make those long-term debt payments, because you are contractually obligated to make those. You signed a contract with the bank that you were going to make those payments every month for the duration of that credit term.
Sure. And I mean, okay, so now we've addressed the white elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the first point of call? I know that a lot of times with consumers, the first thing we do, or the most natural thing we do, is to hide.
Yes.
And sort of hope that the problem will go away.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that first point of call? What do I do? And I mean, I'm talking now in terms of, like, what are the options that are available for us as consumers? Because a lot of times, Andrea, we don't know what we don't know.
So I always recommend something as simple as printing out your bank statement, sitting with a highlighter and counting how many coffees you buy on a weekly basis.
Okay.
And if that's something that you're willing to cut, that's a fairly good start. Have a look and see what your grocery bill looks like when you add up all of those transactions on a monthly basis. How much money are you spending on digital streaming services, and can you maybe cut one of those? There are always cuts that can be made in terms of someone's expenditure. And taking the output of that exercise to your bank is a good start. As I said, the bank knows that you're not paying your debt. This is not something that escapes them. And a proactive conversation with your banking representative to say, this is what my situation looks like. My income is X. My current expenditure is Y. I can possibly cut, and show them what you've highlighted on the statements. I can possibly cut the following expenses.
Okay.
If I, and this is the good starting point for any banking conversation, is if I can take a payment holiday on my debt for 3 months, I can look at paying off, and this is generally how these conversations can start, is that if you take a 3-month payment holiday on your home loan, you can take that installment and pay off your more expensive debt, like credit card or store credit, for example. If you tell the bank that you're not going to, or that you're requesting to not pay your home loan for 3 months, but you're going to take those installments and pay off other more expensive debt
to free up money,
they're going to go for that. No bank wants to take your home away. So be proactive, do your homework, do that affordability assessment, and go to them with a plan.
I like bringing in conversations that we have off camera. And you and I were having a discussion around a person who purchased their home before COVID, what they knew to be paying versus what they're actually paying now.
Yes.
Do you want to share that with us, please?
So before I left to come here this morning, I thought I would have a look and see what those numbers looked like. And I took an average consumer who took on a bond of 2 million Rand in March 2020. The interest rates had just gone down and went down to their lowest levels a month or two thereafter. And if you have a look at what that graph looks like, it's a scary picture. We all know what the interest rates have done. But that same person is paying more than 7,000 Rand per month more for their home than they were paying in March 2020.
No way.
That is a terrifying number. And that is a sign of what so many South Africans are going through at the moment. That almost seems untenable for a lot of South Africans.
Yes, and I mean, where do you find an extra 7,000 Rand a month?
Yes.
Sure, which brings me to my next question. I mean, we are talking about the rising interest rates. We are talking about these belts that we have to constantly tighten up. What would you say is a tip? And I'm asking for an inside tip here. Would you recommend fixed or variable interest rate?
So for someone who is about to sign their life away for a 20 or 30-year bond, it's certainly worth asking your bank for the options to fix your interest rates. Because indicatively, what economists are telling us now, and without a crystal ball, none of us know the answer to this, but indicatively, we can assume that there will be at least one more interest rate hike this year. And then we're going to expect to see rates stay at their current levels in the medium term and eventually come back down. We know why interest rates are going up. This is basic economics.
Yes.
The inflation is currently outside of the bounds at which we as a country would like it to be, and they're using the interest rate cycles to try and contain inflation. But what that really means for the average South African is that food prices are going up every month. Their basket of goods that they're walking out of the supermarket with costs them more than it did the month before. And with the pressure on the other side, with interest rates going up, we just can't escape it. This is what life is. So a conversation with your bank, if you're just about to sign up for a home loan now, is going to entail asking them what rate they would give you for the normal standard variable home loan rate contract, and ask them what rate they'd give you for a fixed rate. And you can't assume you're going to get the same rate, because that is unfortunately not how banks work. And they're going to price a fixed rate at a slightly higher rate because that's how they make money out of consumers. And that's accepted. We can't get away from that. But it's certainly worth asking what rate they'd give you for a fixed rate and what term they would give you for that. Because what the banks are doing is giving you a slightly higher rate over a period of 24 months. And you can then renegotiate a rate thereafter. They're not going to fix it for the life of the bond, and I wouldn't recommend to anyone to fix a rate for 20 years now. But I think it's probably a good idea to look at those two different rate offers and what that translates to in terms of monthly installment for the period in question, be it 2 years or be it 3 years. And it's going to be very easy to see how much the installment's going to differ for each of those options and whether it's worth it for you as a consumer.
I'm assuming also, Andrea, that the interest that the banks are charging you is also based on, again, your credit profile, how healthy it is, the affordability, and all of that. So, I mean, it is then critical for consumers, while we know that we are facing these challenges, to actually keep a good credit score on other debt repayments, so that it's easy to actually make those, I suppose, the negotiations when it comes to...
Well, that's basically the key to the door. If you are not a viable credit customer, the bank's not even going to let you in the door. And that's the first check that they do. When you apply for a home loan and you go through a mortgage originator where you complete one application and go to 4 or 5 banks, first thing they're going to check is what your credit score is and how well you've repaid your debt in the past. And if that score's not good and there's a history of not paying debt or not paying full debt, they are literally going to stop your application process there and then and decline you as a potential credit customer. There's no point in them going through the process of looking at any other documentation and looking at your bank statements because they can see up front that credit score is not good and you've been less than stellar at paying debt off in the past. That process is now over for you as a customer.
So that payment behavior, all those tricky things we do. I'll skip this month, I'll pay double next month.
They know.
Or I'll steal from this one to pay this one. They can see all of that. Yes. And I see now people are talking about restructuring, the terms of your loans. Talk to us about that, what it means, what does it look like?
So that is another option for someone who is battling to pay off their current home loan. And if you've gone through the debt repayment holiday process and you've exhausted that as an option, you've cut down on your expenses and there's nothing else to squeeze out of your budget, you might even go and look for another job so that you can increase your income. If you've gotten to the point where there are no more cutbacks to make, there are no more side hustles you can sign yourself up for, you're now in a situation where you're thinking it's either a good idea to downsize or maybe renegotiate the terms of your loan. That is another option. Comes, though, at a short-term cost. Because no bank is ever going to say to you, well, sure, here, have some new home loan terms. It will give you a new rate. We'll look at the period for this home loan. You're going to need to go through a renegotiation with a bank or with other banks and sign up for a brand new loan and a whole new credit term. That comes at a short-term cost. because a new bond is going to need to be registered against your name. And nothing is for free in this world. So you're going to have to pay the bond registration costs to get a new bond at a lower rate. So you might be looking at lower installments in the long term, but you need to have some funds set aside to pay those upfront costs.
Wow. So it's not an email to say,
No.
I have a 20-year bond with you. Please increase it to 25 years. It's not as simple as that.
It's not as simple as that.
And I'm glad you're mentioning costs, Andrew, because a lot of times we as consumers just look at the fact that this is the bond repayment. When they tell you, okay, this is the price of the property, this is how much you'll be paying over X amount of months or years or whatever the case may be. But I mean, we often hear about, transfer costs. How do you go about assessing the costs? In fact, firstly, what are these transfer costs?
So there's so many costs that you need to be aware of. And years ago, the banks would always talk about this magical unicorn that was a 108% bond. We don't have such things in this country anymore. I'm going back 15 years ago now. That extra 8% was a bucket of money that the bank would keep aside as a part of your home loan to pay the costs. So work on average about 8%. Okay. You need to pay costs to transfer a property from someone else's name into your own. Those are called transfer costs. And there are various different line items that make up quite a significant amount of money. And you pay attorneys, and it's not just one attorney. There are multiple attorneys through this process. There are stamp duties and various different fees. There is the cost of transferring a property into your name. If you need to do a renegotiation and sign up for a new bond, you don't pay those transfer costs again. That is an upfront amount of money to transfer the property. In fact, what they're doing is they're transferring it from the previous owner into the bank's name, because the bank owns your property for 20 to 30 years.
You pay it out.
Yes.
It's not your property.
Yes. But those transfer costs have to be paid. Then those registration costs, and again, I did a quick calculation before I arrived, that 2 million rand bond that we spoke about earlier, the bond registration costs on that are approximately 45 to 50,000 rand. And that is now to register a bond in your name, so that you can't own your property for 20 to 30 years, but the bank does. But that's a separate bucket that you need to have those funds available, either investments that you draw out, or you need to go and get yourself a personal loan, which I don't recommend, but because that's just expensive debt. But you need to have those bond registration costs. And if you're doing a renegotiation, that 45 to 50,000 rand is what you're going to need to have on hand
for the renegotiation,
just so that you can get a new bond on that property, hopefully at a significantly lower interest rate than the one that you're currently paying, so that you've got some breathing room every month with a lower home loan installment.
And it goes back to the point again, we don't know what we don't know. And that's why these kind of discussions are very important for consumers to actually understand what the process of this home loan or home buying entails. And I mean, let's talk about downsizing or right sizing.
Yes.
I mean, these days it seems like everyone is thinking about downsizing, but is it practical? And what are those hidden costs? Because now it seems as though there's a whole lot of costs that we need to be aware of before we actually enter into the property buying space.
Yes.
So what talk to us about these hidden costs to downsizing.
So downsizing is a good option for you if you are a certain age and your property is just too big for the two of you empty nesters because you've managed to get rid of your kids finally after however many years. That's a separate conversation. But downsizing for the purposes of reducing your monthly costs is something that people should consider if they've looked at and tried every alternative option. Maybe downsizing is something as a viable option for them, but the costs, short-term, long-term gain for short-term cost is just something you've got to be aware of. So one option for potential downsizing is if a family has got a lovely house that is costing them a certain amount of money every month for entailing a home loan installment, levies, rates and taxes, water, electricity. Take all of those together, work out what that amount of money is. That is something that is looking a little bit untenable from a cost management perspective. Look at whether you could possibly rent out your property to someone else, and know that you can take the cost of water and electricity and pass that over to a prospective tenant. The rates and taxes, you're going to have to pay those regardless. Levies, you're probably going to have to pay for that unless you can convince a prospective tenant to pay that as well. But take the total bucket of costs that it is costing you to live in that property every month, and how much of that you could possibly get a tenant to pay for, and whether you can then rent a smaller property for a year or so and manage the difference between those two. That's a short-term downsizing option available to some people. If you are willing to live in a different neighborhood, in a smaller property that costs you significantly less, and you can rent your property out, you're not making any big downsizing decisions here. That's a short-term option. Or know that maybe those numbers don't stack up. You might need to sell this property. The costs. We keep coming back to the costs. You're going to need to pay an estate agent to help sell your property. So whatever price you put it on the market for, know that you're at this stage unlikely to get that price, because it is a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market at the moment. And whatever price you do get, you're going to need to pay a certain percentage of that off to the estate agent, because you use them and they put their expertise into the sale, and that is one of the costs that you're going to have to pay. And then there are the costs of cancelling a bond, because we come back to that contract. You agreed to a 20-year contract to pay a certain amount of money every month for 20 years to a bank, and now you're reneging on that contract, and they're saying, okay, fine, we'll cancel your bond, but there's going to be a cost involved with that. Again, come back to the costs, do the calculations, ask the questions, and banks are always going to be open and honest about what those costs are. They're just going to charge you what they're going to charge you. But ask a bank how much it's going to cost to cancel your bond. Ask an estate agent how much they are likely to charge you for effecting a sale on your property. It's generally a percentage of the sale price. But as we said earlier before we were on air, everything in life is negotiable. So if an estate agent says to you, well, my standard rate is 7% of the value of the property, see if you can negotiate them down to 5%.
I see.
If you don't ask, you'll never get.
And
at worst, they're going to say, no, I'm not prepared to reduce my commission. And then if you really want, you can find another estate agent. Everyone's willing to negotiate.
I see.
But every cost not every cost, but there are certainly a large amount of costs that you're going to have to pay out through this process that are negotiable. And ask up front. And if they say no, they say no. But if they say yes, then you're looking at paying out less as a part of this transaction.
You know, you triggered a thought when you spoke about the buyer's market. People talk about the buyer's market, the seller's market. What does that mean? And how can one actually look out for those times?
So they are always driven by macroeconomic factors, and we find ourselves as a country at the moment where we know what inflation is doing. We've spoken about that. We know what the interest rates are doing as a result of the inflation, and how that has impacted the property market is that there are a lot more buyers out there than there are sellers at the moment. And the buyers at the moment hold the power. People are desperate to sell because they need to downsize, they can't afford, they're immigrating, they're semigrating. So there are a lot of properties on the market at the moment, and there's an oversupply of properties. And buyers are now saying, well, you look desperate. So I'm going to offer you a slightly cheekier offer than I would have a year ago, because I can see that this house is empty. And this is happening at the moment, and that people have already left because they weren't able to sell their property. And your house just looks less appealing when it hasn't got furniture in. And buyers are going to offer a slightly lower offer on that property. And you might be desperate enough, because this property's been on the market for 12, 18 months, that you're going to accept any lower offer that you get right now. But those macroeconomic factors go through waves and cycles like we can expect. And if you go onto the private property website at the moment and have a look at properties on sale in the suburbs and the neighborhoods that you're looking at, you will see, and I'm not going to stake my head to this figure, but you'll see that at least 50% of those properties are reduced at the moment.
I see, because now buyers have options.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
And they can negotiate and they can say, well, if I'm not happy with this offer, I can go elsewhere.
Yes.
Oh, so that's what it means when it's a buyer's market.
So a buyer's market means there's an oversupply of properties, and buyers hold the power because they can look at 10 properties in one neighborhood and look at how their affordability stacks up in terms of the value and the offer and the current market conditions within that neighborhood. And because there are 10 properties now, as opposed to maybe 5, 2 or 3 years ago, you've now just got double the amount of options that you had, and you're more powerful as a buyer at the moment.
Sure. Andrea, thank you so much. I mean, we sincerely appreciate the insights and the contribution. I mean, I had a great time chatting with you, and it has been an absolute pleasure hosting you tonight.
Lovely to be here
Thank
and to
you
share
so
the
much.
knowledge I've got. This is what we need to do at the moment in the industry, is tell people the things that they might not know. Information is power for everyone at the moment.
Information is power. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you for joining us tonight on this topic that was both insightful and impactful. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the hashtag Find Your New Home on privateproperty.co.za and hashtag the Private Property Podcast. And share your comments. Good night.